we're going to continue in our learning of the Rambam in terms of being able to understand the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach and how to teach a non-Jew. We're going to learn Hilchos Malachim, the laws of kings and their wars, and we're going to learn Perek Yud, the 10th chapter. And like we said before, this is the preparation for the coming of Mashiach. And we see that the next parak is going to be the laws of Mashiach. So the next two parakim to the end of the Mishnah Torah. So let's jump in over here, and we'll go through this as much as we're able to tonight to cover some of this material. And many people learn this Rambam every year, every 3 years, or have studied it otherwise. And it's very important to remember that the purpose of this right here is not a substitute for that, but to recognize and bring to your attention the very, very essential points and the reality of this, that this is not a theoretical concept. This is not really something to skim through in your learning, but to recognize and see the obligation that we have to be able to teach this to every single human being. That everyone, that a non-Jew that makes a mistake in one of his mitzvahs, he's potter from any sort of punishment. So there's an exception for this, that if a person killed somebody, that if he killed somebody by mistake, then the person who comes to avenge the murder is not going to be killed. So this is a fascinating idea here, because we see that by the Yidden, there's an ir miklat, meaning to say we can understand that if someone wants to take a revenge on the death of a relative, then they might go pursue this person, and because the person who did the killing was not careful enough and it was careless. So there's something called a city of refuge, but there's no city of refuge for a non-Jew. But even though this person could pursue him and take revenge, at the same time, the courts that the non-Jews are meant to set up to enforce the 7 laws of Noach will not execute him. So this is talking about when a person didn't have kavanah. So let's say he had a forbidden relationship with someone that he mistook for his wife, or that, but this is not the case or he thought the person wasn't married. But if he knew that this person was really a married woman, but he didn't know that it was a forbidden relationship, but he just thought it's permissible, and if he killed somebody and he just didn't know that it was usur, then this person is going to be executed, because the Rambam says here, because it's close to being mazid, a person has to be killed. You shouldn't consider this to be something that's a mistake, because he had an obligation to learn the obligations of a non-Jew, and he did not learn. So, it's interesting, in a sense, we know that we're the ones that are responsible to be the teachers. So if we see that a person's so ignorant, he doesn't know that murder is the wrong thing, then he's responsible, but also his teachers are poor. And our job is to be teaching the world what is right and what is wrong, what is murder and what is not murder. That's our job, and we have to make sure that we fulfill that. But ultimately, the responsibility, as much as it's our responsibility to teach, ultimately it's the responsibility of the non-Jewish person to know what laws he's responsible for. Base. What happens if Ben Neyach she'ansu anas le'over al achas me mitzvaysav mutar la la'aver afilu nenas la'aver al avedizor over b'fi she'enon mitzuvin al kiddush Hashem lo'ilam ein shemehem lo kotten v'lo charesh v'lo sheita b'fi she'enon b'nei mitzvah. So a couple important concepts over here. Number one is the person is required, a non-Jew is required to serve a Avodah. The Rambam is writing here that he does not have an obligation to give up his life to instead of worshiping the Avodah Zarah, whereas a Jewish person does have an obligation to sanctify God's name by not bowing down to the Avodah Zarah, and the process of not bowing to the Avodah Zarah is a sanctification of God's name, even though it results in his death. So the Rambam says here, because they're not commanded in this concept of having to give up their life to sanctify God's name. This is a whole fascinating subject in and of itself, which Amit Hashem will get into at another time. Now he then brings the concept of what are the requirements for being considered a person who's culpable. So a person has to be not a child, and one of the things that we know is that whereas the age of a child turning into an adult by a Jew is 13 years old for a boy and 12 years old for a girl, but this shir is not given to the non-Jews. Meaning to say, this particular cutoff point is not given to the non-Jews. Now, this is an example of a din that can sometimes paralyze the Jewish person from teaching, because he says to himself, I don't know where that cutoff is, and I have to teach a non-Jew what is the responsibility what's the age of responsibility and culpability, and doesn't know the answer. How are we going to tell a court what the answer is? So the answer to that is that whenever a person feels themselves paralyzed out of suffix, we know that's definitely the tachbailis of a malik. Because the fact of the matter is, this would not be the first time that someone was ma'ayin in a halacha and it comes up with a solution to something that has not yet been clarified. This is the whole point of learning Torah, is to be able to clarify the points of Torah that are not yet clarified. So for a person to say that since he doesn't know and doesn't want to take the responsibility to figure it out, therefore he's not going to teach people because he's afraid he's going to be asked this question, is a complete abdication of responsibility. And unfortunately, it's something that has happened. So the answer is not something we're going to bring into this class right now, because we're here talking in the most general details. But in another class, we'll get into the details of how to mevayer this halacha, that there are different understandings of what is the concept of becoming a gadol, an adult. And the question is it related purely to age, or is it related to whether the person's a bar das, whether the person has the ability to understand what he's doing? And if it's the relationship to the understanding what he's doing, then it is something that is going to be based on the assessment of the judges if he's old enough to understand what he's doing. So if we're going to say that it's not based on a clear line in time, based on the concept that it's not one of the shiurim, the measurements were not given to the non-Jews in the sense of that something that's given to the Yidden on Har Sinai. If we're going to take that position, and therefore 13 doesn't apply, then we can't say it's a hefker welt, and because we don't know what the age is supposed to be, that therefore we're not going to teach the non-Jews what that murder is forbidden, and that a person who murders has to suffer the consequences. And the death penalty is the consequence for murder. So it has to be that there has to be an answer. And the answer is tzarich iyun gadol, but it can't be that it's left unresolved permanently. So one way to resolve this question is to look at the question of whether this person is a bar das, and whether or not there is an age after which everyone is presumed to be a bar das. Because we assume that everyone is a bar das unless they're not, and it can be shown they're not, which is already covered by the rest of the sentence of the Rambam, that a sheita is not going to be punished. So if someone's 19 years old and doesn't know, is so immature in a way of being a sheita, we don't have a trouble seeing that person is not going to be culpable. And the question is, well, what age does that responsibility for the vast majority of humanity, except the Yetzim and a Klal, who's going to be a sheita, is going to click in? So I think that the answer is the das neista to the concept that what the Eibishter wants from us is a clear standard to set for humanity to be able to judge its actions and take responsibility. And it would look something along the lines of, when is a person able to be culpable for and understand his own actions, which is something that's going to be older than a child, but it's not going to necessarily have to reach fully the age of 13 of adulthood. And it could be something that's going to be variable based on the circumstances, that a person knows when he is now a bar das. And it's very interesting that the previous halacha said that the goy is responsible for learning himself. Every person knows when that responsibility clicks in. A person reaches a point in life where they know they need to take life seriously, that they're no longer a little child. And in fact, a person, if you say to a 3-year-old that you're a baby, he'll say, no, I'm not a baby, because he knows that he's no longer a baby. And you say to a teenager that he's a child, he knows that he's not a child, and he's now seeking to interact in the world in a way of an adult. So there's clearly is a transition point. And the transition point has to be something that has to be clarified, which we will do in another shir. But the point of bringing up over here is that the concept is, do not get paralyzed, because even if you don't know the answer to that question, when does a person become an adult? There's clearly people that are adults, and they need to learn, and the children, non-Jewish children, need to learn also. And when that in time for Beis Din is going to sit down and be able to make a determination of a person's culpability, this issue will have been resolved, and therefore should not hold anyone back from teaching. And anyone listening to the shir who's going to be ma'ayin in this subject might even come up with a even greater way of understanding it than what I've presented as the general parameters of the discussion. But it has to come out of the level of pilpul and out of the level of maybes and so forth, into a level of clarity and level of certainty that the guidelines are clearly established for all humanity. That is our responsibility, and we cannot let the size of the responsibility scare us away. So the Halacha Gimel discusses the concept of a ben neach that is converting, and then he completes the conversion process, and afterwards he says that he wants to go back to being a ger teshuv, and the answer is he has to stay as a yid. We do not listen to him. He does not have an option. And the question is, what happens if he was a cotton when he was converted because of the situation with his family, and he became a convert as a child when his family was converting? Then at the time that he becomes a bar mitzvah, he is able, or bas mitzvah is able to decide that he is meicher, he does not want to become a yid, and he will become a ger teshuv. He does have that option. But once he passes that point in time and he doesn't object, then he is now fully a ger tzedek. Now, then halacha, there's some other details over here, which are not common situations, but should be learned anyways. Din dalad ben neach, that God forbid curses Hashem's name, or serves a avodah zarah, or has a forbidden relationship, or kills. As here it specifically mentions adultery, or he kills his friend, and then he becomes a convert. So because a person becoming a convert is not a continuation of the previous person, is a new person, then that is a situation where a person is not going to be culpable for his prior actions. But if he killed a Jewish person, or a married Jew, or had relations with a married Jewish woman, then he would still be liable and would be executed. And then it talks about what the methods of execution are. In Hay, it says, or reminds us, we've already explained that all the execution of a ben neach is by the sword, unless it's through his culpability is because of relationship with a Jewish married woman, or a person that's pledged in marriage, then it would be through stoning. and then through the form of execution of strangulation if he was having relations with someone after this person was already, the marriage process had started, but was before intimacy with her husband. Vav, mipnei kabbalah shebnei noach asurim b'harvas behema or harkavas ilon bilvad. Now it brings over here, the Rambam brings that a non-Jewish person is not allowed to mix the breeding of animals. This is something that's forbidden to non-Jews, and also the grafting of trees is also something that's forbidden. So this is an important concept to realize over here. The reason he says bilvad is because there's a whole discussion of whether kalaim is something that's usher to the non-Jews in general, and bringing from the Gemara that the Rambam is coming down on the side of saying that it's only these two things, as opposed to other things that are brought down as possibilities. Now, but they're not persons. The non-Jews not killed on them. So one of the things we see over here is that a very important concept in Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. The Sheva Mitzvahs themselves are only the ones for which there is the consequence of a death penalty. But there are other things, and many other things that the non-Jews are obligated in. So we see over here two of them. And we have to realize that the concept of nizar, that they're required, that they're going to be punished for it with the death penalty, is a status in itself to a mitzvah. But it doesn't mean that there's not other mitzvahs that they're required and obligated to keep. And we see two examples over here, even though there's no death penalty for them. And a non-Jewish person who hits a Jewish person, even even causing him an injury, even though the person's obligated in the death penalty, is not going to be executed. So that's again, the important concept here is not to see the Sheva Mitzvahs as just a very limited, small list. It's actually a very broad list, of which the 7 general categories are the ones for which there is the consequence of a death penalty. Zayin Hamila Nistava ba Avram Bazar Bilvad. Mila was commanded to Avram and his offspring only. And then it brings proof of this, that Ishmael is not included and Esav is not included in the commandment to have a circumcision. So the question over here is in the next thing. It says that B'nai Keturah, that they are also the offspring of Avram after Ishmael and Yitzchak. They are chayiv in Misa. Chayiv in Mila, chayiv in being circumcised. But since they were mixed in, the B'nai Keturah were mixed in with B'nai Ishmael, everyone is obligated on Mila in the 8th day, and they're not executed for not doing this. So it's very interesting that a person is the descendant of Ishmael is required to have a bris on the 8th day. I'm going to cover now a fascinating subject, which could be a topic into itself, but an akum here, she'esik b'teira, chayiv misa. Now it's interesting. The language the Rambam uses is he says over here in the other sections of the Rambam, he says b'nei Noach, class of b'nei Noach. All of a sudden the Rambam brings over here akum she'asik b'teira chayiv misas. An idol worshiper who learns Torah is chayiv misa. They should only learn the Sheva Mitzvahs of theirs. And also an idol worshiper who keeps Shabbos, even on a weekday, if he did it for himself, like a Shabbos, he's Chayav Misa. And same thing if he makes a holiday of his own. The general principle over here is we don't let them. We do not let them to create a new religion or to do mitzvahs for themselves from their own das, meaning things that just new ideas, new religious practices. But rather, but rather his only options are that he should become a ger tzedek and do all the mitzvahs, or that he should stand in his Torah, the Torah of the Bnei Noach, the Chassidim Mashalom, and not add and not take away. So, if he is Isaac with Torah, or Shabbos, and he rests, or a Chodesh Davar, he innovates a new thing, he's struck and punished. And he's telling me he's chayav misa on this, but he's not going to actually be executed. So there's a couple fascinating things over here that we have to understand. Number one is, it brings in the Gemara that on one hand, that a guy that says, it's like Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Akum she'asik v'terah chayav misa, but then it also says that a guy that's learns Torah, akum v'isik b'Torah, feel akum v'isik b'Torah hayhu k'kohen gadol. So a non-Jew that learns Torah is like the kohen gadol. So the answer is that the parts of the Torah that are forbidden to a non-Jewish person are those parts that are not at all relevant to him. So the Meiri brings that really Rov Kakol Kuvei Torah is relevant to the non-Jews. How's that possible? Because the mitzvahs, most of the mitzvahs we're going to see are either branches of the Sheva mitzvahs, or they relate to mishpatim, to the laws and rules that relate to the orderly functioning of society, which apply to the non-Jews. So when you're down to what's left, then you're left with mitzvahs that, let's say, for example, related to Shmira Shabbos, that would not be something that would be applicable to a non-Jewish person. And the laws of the Karbonos that are in the service of the base of Mikdash, that is specifically not something that the non-Jew could do. Doesn't mean that they can't know the general concept of what's going to be in the base of Mikdash, but it means that the Asik B'Torah. Now, the Rebbe brings in Hadran al Rambam that really the Ben Noach is going to be Asik in the Torah, in even the Umki of Torah, in a way of really understanding the Torah, and we'll get to that in a different explanation, different shir. We're meant to be able to cover that sicha, because that sicha, I think, is a fundamental understanding and shift of the way we look at the non-Jewish person. That really the non-Jews will come to really be mafalfel in the Torah and learn the Torah b'emkus, that this is something that the non-Jews are meant to do in the areas that apply to them, which is most of the Torah. Also, the Indian of Shabbos, very interesting. There's a Rav Yul Schwartz in Yerushalayim that wrote a sefer of Inyanim for Bnei Noach, and he writes over there that Zochas Yom HaShabbos actually applies to the non-Jews, and therefore a non-Jewish person can make Kiddush, and really should make Kiddush on Friday night, because it's an Indian of being Mazkir B'Sheshis and Me'Breshis. Now, this is going to Pella, you're going to say you're going to fall off your chair when you hear that. At the same time, we see the Kli Yakar says, why was the Torah given on Har Sinai? It says over there, Zochas Yom HaShabbos, and the Torah, the says libras that were given on by Ve'as Chonan, the second luchos were given, says Shemes Yom HaShabbos, but Chashai was given quietly. So the Kli Yakar says that because the first Aseres HaDibros were heard by the entire world, and therefore the whole world heard it, and Zochas Yom HaShabbos is shaykh to the non-Jews, that they have a connection to remembering the seventh day on which Hashem rested. Whereas Shomer Yom HaShabbos was given privately to the Jewish people with the giving of the second tablets, and that's something that is only for the Jewish people to be shomer as Yom HaShabbos. But I did see recently learning in Reish Tzaddik Ches in Hilchos Shabbos, Alter B'Shulchan Aruch, he brings over there that a person shouldn't use a nair that's written that's lit by a non-Jew on Shabbos, because it comes from this. It's like Maisa Vera, and the question that I ask anyone who's listening to this to look into is to explain how it is that even if it's totally mutter for a non-Jewish person to be Machala Shabbos and to light a Shabbos on candle, what's the tzad of Avera for a non-Jew to be lighting a candle on Shabbos, that you shouldn't even use it after Shabbos for Havdalah? And this has nothing to do with Amir La'akam, because you didn't tell him to do it. He did it for himself on Shabbos. And Efshit to say that the answer is that there is a concept of a non-Jew recognizing the sanctity of Shabbos, and even though it's mutter for him to do malachas in Shabbos, and it's asur for him to be Shabbos the way that he's going to do no malachas and keep Shabbos like a yid, at the same time, a non-Jew should recognize that there is something special on the Shabbos day, that it's better that he should be ma'ayit his regular affairs in recognition of the tremendous Yom HaShabbos that is really a time when humanity is meant to recognize. Remember that Hashem created the world in 6 days, and then on the seventh day he rested, which is the concept of really revealing what the world is meant to be, a place where there's not the struggle of creating and the struggle of refining and the struggle of building, but rather a time of menuchas nefesh, that the soul is at rest and is at calm. And that's really, like it says, Mashiach, when Mashiach comes, Yom Shekuli Shabbos, it's a taste of what it's going to be like when Mashiach comes. So in a certain way, it's possible to suggest that what the Alter Rebbe is referring to, based on the Gemara, is that there is an inyan of something that would be preferable for a non-Jew to reduce and recognize that there's a lower quality to the malachas that are done on Shabbos, even though it's something that it's not forbidden to him, and even though it's something that he's not allowed to completely abstain from the malachas, yet there's still a concept of a Shabbos by a non-Jew, both by the Zochas Yom HaShabbos and the lesser quality of the things that are done on Shabbos, even when done by a non-Jew. So the third thing I want to bring out here is the very, very essential point of that they're not allowed to create their own religion. So we don't say to them, "Oh, go do whatever you want." Now that I taught you that there's one in Hashem, go do whatever you want. You want to make a holiday on a Wednesday. You want to make a day in May to celebrate Thanksgiving and for something, new religious practices. That's not allowed. I mean, obviously Thanksgiving is like we say, it's every day, and maybe Thanksgiving wasn't such a good example. But the fact is that they cannot go and create new religious holidays and new days. That's not something that's allowed. The only holidays are the Jewish holidays. That's the only way of serving Hashem is through the Torah and through the teachings of the Torah that were brought down on Har Sinai, and the divine wisdom that's available to every one of them and every one of us through Hashem. That's the only way that it's to be. The process of creating days of celebration and days of recognition of Hashem's kindness for us is meant to be within that framework. So this is something that we have to recognize, the responsibility that we have to educate them about what are the milestones of the year. That the Rosh Hashanah is a milestone of the year. Each one of these days is a milestone of the year that has significance for the entire of humanity, and that we need to educate them about that so they understand, and they're not thinking there's nothing going on, let's make up our own religion because we want to have some meaningful days ourselves. No, on the contrary, all the meaningful days that we need already exist. And that's something and all the meaningful days they need already exist. So we need to educate them, but the significance of it. So now we're coming up with Shavuos this week. And Shavuos is the time of the giving of the Torah. Giving the Torah is a celebration for all mankind, because it says clearly that the Eser's Dibros is 620 letters, which the Baal Turim says is the Taryag mitzvahs, and the 7 mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So, and we see that after the Torah was given, the whole world heard first of all, and then Moshe Rabbeinu wrote in the 70 languages the Be'er Heitev. So this is what the celebration of Shavuos is for all of humanity. We're going to pause here and continue next time with another halacha. We're going to see that non-Jewish people can take on other mitzvahs in the Torah. We're going to discuss the exact framework of that next time.